Welcome to the Conscious Publicist Podcast, a space where thoughts become ideas to advocate for a more conscious human experience in the media. Our thoughts and ideas inspire action, and the most notable leaders and organizations have transformed thoughts and ideas into global initiatives that have impacted the lives of millions. My name is Ashley Graham, and as a woman-owned business founder and publicist, I guide leaders, visionaries, and creators in discovering their conscious media voice and methodologies that inspire connection, community, and impact through aligned media channels. In this podcast, we'll dive into public relations, thought leadership, business, and entrepreneurship, all through the lens of being a conscious human being. I'll take you behind the scenes into the habits, thoughts, and modalities that have helped leaders shift past paradigms of limiting beliefs, comparison, and self-doubt to show up for themselves to become the subject matter experts they were called to be. Subscribe to the show on Apple or Spotify and join us on this journey of awakening the conscious, enlightened leader within you. I am very excited for today's conversation because we are going to shift the gears a little bit from the last few episodes that have been shared. I just got back from Salt Lake City as I was speaking at the Outlier Festival, and the session that I hosted was around how to build holistic and conscious media relationships with media contacts, but then also podcast hosts, as this was a conference focused on podcasting. One of the reasons why I love this topic so much is because relationships are truly at the forefront of any creative endeavor as well as in business. I have felt like everything that I've shared so far on the Conscious Publicist podcast speaks to this underlying energy of how to build a more connected relationship with self, first and foremost. But when we have a stronger identity and a stronger relationship with our sense of self, we're able to have stronger relationships with those around us. Outside of the number of different strategies and approaches to building a public relations presence or following media relations, I believe that the most powerful strategy that you can follow is just to simply lead with connection and relationship when it comes to having the right conversations in the public's eye through different types of media verticals. To get us started, I wanted to focus on point one that I made during my session, which is get to know your contacts. I believe that the more research and the more awareness that we have around the media contacts that we're connecting with, the better. And there was two main subpoints to this topic that I think just speaks to the people relations part of PR and just ultimately how to lead with building a true connection with somebody that you've never connected with before. And so the first subpoint is identify their passions, their topics of interest, and what lights them up. Think about a time when you have gotten an email from somebody that you've never connected with before, and they were able to introduce themselves to you, highlighting something that you had either talked about on another platform or had shared on social media that directly connected you two through a shared point of interest. As a podcast host, but then also just as a creator in this space for so long, there is nothing more impressive, keyword there, nothing more impressive than getting contacted by somebody I've never connected with before, and they've been able to highlight something that I have either shared recently or has been able to make a connection into something that we cherish between ourselves. I believe, again, when we're making connections with somebody that we don't really know them, we don't know their backstory, we don't know their history, and we don't know their passions. If we take the time to kind of familiarize ourselves with them and make or bridge a connection through that shared point of interest, I think it just entices the other person on the receiving end to take that conversation further. Another subpoint here is I mentioned how to observe how your contacts present themselves and who they engage with. I feel that it is very empowering to take the time to really feel out if somebody is in pure alignment with who you are. And we are in constant communication with people every single day. I actually mentioned that in the previous episode. That communication and how we engage with people or who we engage with is really at the intersection of how we create. And when it comes to podcast hosts or other media contacts, they are very active and they're very fluid in the ways that they communicate with people. And we can see it. It is all on a silver platter for us to see and engage with. And I feel that, again, the conversation is very significant when you take a conversation further with somebody that you've never connected with before, when you know exactly how they communicate their brilliance, how they communicate on behalf of others that they've collaborated with. And I feel that that is how you can find true alignments with your media contacts is if you take the time to be the observer and really understand how they communicate, where they communicate, and how other people respond to them. My next big focus topic point for nurturing and establishing strong relationships with your media contacts is to ensure alignment. I actually jumped ahead and kind of talked about this in point one, but just to further emphasize the impact of finding alignments with your media contacts is to look for common passions and values. I am a connector by default, and I don't know why I always lead into this lately, but I'm also a projector in human design. And so I live for connections with people and conversations where we are continuously fueled by one another from similar passions, insights, experiences, and anything else that kind of bonds us in that conversation. And I believe that actually leading through the projector magic is an incredible way to build relationships with people in general, but then also building relationships with people in the media. I think I talked about this briefly in the previous episode, just talking about the reality of doing solo podcasting is you don't have somebody on the other end to interact with you. It is just showing up and speaking your brilliance and just publishing it for the world to see. I feel that dynamic is very similar in the sense of building media relationships because you are basically putting out an opening for a conversation, an opening for a connection with somebody who does not have that awareness of who you are. So it takes a lot of courage to really put yourself out there to create a conversation around a topic of interest that you want to present to that person. But if you can ultimately just lead or find the passions and the moments of commonality and use that at the forefront of your outreach or at the forefront or your communications, I believe that it's much easier to bridge that connection just knowing that you don't already have a pre-existing relationship with them. And I feel that that's directly connected with ensuring alignment. Another sub point that I have for ensuring alignment is to evaluate if their presentation aligns with your values and principles. And another sub point is to just remember that media relationships are two-way and mutual alignment is key. I don't want to over preface or dive into these last 2 points because I feel I already did a really good job kind of painting the picture there. But if I was going to highlight or dive further into evaluating if the media presentation aligns with your values and principles, what I want to just kind of dive further around that topic with you today is ensuring that the way that the media presents themselves is in a way of integrity and they follow very conscious principles and conscious values that directly align with yourself. And then last, just remembering that media relationships are a two-way street and mutual alignment is key. At the end of the day, two people coming together to create a media conversation in whatever format it is is it's one person holding one end of that space and the other person receiving and vice versa. I do believe that I always get the the vision of a pendulum swinging from left to right kind of when I think about this. But in order for the pendulum to get immense amount of momentum to swing to the right, it has to also sway to the left. And it's a give and take, it's a push and pull. And I think being able to create the balance between the relationship and the balance of the conversation is what makes for a very impactful piece of content at the end of that connection. Another focal point is lead with connection. And I'll probably just lead into a couple of examples and personal stories for this section. If you do want to go and actually see a visual representation of the points that I'm talking about today, you can head over to theconsciouspublicist.com/outlier. That's Outlier. Or you can go over to my LinkedIn newsletter where I talked or highlighted these points from Outlier as well. But when we lead with connection, my subpoints that I highlighted here is number one, to find relatability and common ground to establish a connection. Point two, focus on building trust for lasting impression and connection. And point three, make a genuine connection that transcends transactional interactions. So, diving into the personal stories around leading with connection is most of the opportunities to be on podcasts, specifically over the last year, have actually come from being invited to be on other people's shows. Now, with myself being in PR and media relations, who does this work or obtains those results for my clients, I know how to do it. And I do believe by the quote that oftentimes it's hard for leaders to do for themselves what they do for others, but my own PR kind of comes secondhand to the work that I do for my clients. But one of the most incredible things, again, about being in this space is sometimes I don't have to do the work because I lead with connections and I lead with relationships every single day. There's always opportunities that I actually get invited to be a part of because I know how to lead with connections and building relationships with other people in the media space. So, again, talking more about the opportunities that I've had over the last year is, from attending different types of events, whether virtual or in person, or just looking to build more referral partnerships or strategic partnerships in general. I have been able to get invited to share my message and to share my expertise on those partners' platforms because we had spent X amount of time just getting to know one another and getting to familiarize ourselves with each other's businesses and what we can share to bring an immense amount of value through the media platform or the media conversations themselves. So I've actually had a good handful of podcast conversations that have come in over the last year, all because I lead with connecting and familiarizing myself with those that I am building relationships and connections with online. This could be a whole episode on itself, but I think the biggest takeaway from an experience like this is to lead with no expectations at the end of making connections and building relationships with other people. And that's kind of why I had mentioned in point three of leading with connection is making a genuine connection that transcends transactional interactions. Now, I feel that transactional interactions could almost be rewritten in the sense of connecting without expectations. But some of the most incredible relationships that I have made over my years of entrepreneurship, but then also just being a creator and visionary in this space, is leading with no expectations with those that I'm connecting with and then receiving an immense amount of opportunities that I could not even ask or expect in the moments of making those connections. And I know that that's difficult. I do recognize that there is a sense of urgency in the business space, that we need to dominate the media conversations and we need to dominate the media space because we need our businesses or our stories or our messages to be relatable and recognized and viable. But at the end of the day, I do believe in energy and I believe in manifestation. You'll hear me use keywords like that. That the more that you just put yourself out there intentionally and you yourself, first and foremost, believe in your business, your journey, your avenues, your story, your message, whatever it is that you're creating, if you believe in it to your core, like attracts like. The universe will always, again, I say universe, but the media space will always bring you the opportunities for you to shine with the purpose of what it is that you're creating. So I wanted just to kind of highlight that. Shifting into point 4 that I talked about at Outlier, which is make a lasting impression. My subpoints here, number 1 being take them by surprise by providing what they might be looking for before they ask. And point 2, demonstrate that you've researched and engaged with their work or projects. The story or example that is coming to mind right now, again, reflecting at Outlier, is I shared my recent mention that was highlighted in Fast Company. Now, that is more on the earned media side. Now, podcasting and podcast guesting is also a form of earned media, which we'll definitely talk about in a future episode. But with this highlight exactly or specifically, there was something interesting that I had utilized. Again, I focus on ideation a lot with my methodology for clients, but then also for my own subject matter expertise. But there was something very significant about this particular topic that I did not feel that I was primarily the go-to subject matter expert for that topic because I have never actually talked about it publicly before. But I led in with my response for this journal request, again, surprising them by providing what they were either looking for or something that they weren't specifically looking for, but added a lot of perspective to the main topic. Now, if you go over to theconsciouspublicist.com and our exclusives, you'll actually see a thought piece that I had written on this topic, which is the connection between Taylor Swift and fan devotion. Now, not necessarily diving into being an expert around Taylor Swift, but one thing that I would say that I am an expert in is the ideation and the psychology behind what causes or leads audiences or leads people in community to follow somebody through all of their years of changes and pivots and identity shifts and everything else that comes with evolving as a person and as a leader. Now, I crafted my response to this journalist, again, sharing that I had a different perspective. I had a publicist perspective into fan devotion or just audience perspective as a whole, and how I believe that Taylor Swift, again, as the highlight of the article, how she has done an incredible job through her industry and through her career to continue to guide people to follow her so closely through all of her identity shifts. And again, going back to the main point here to make a lasting impression, I gave the journalist what she was looking for by, again, speaking to her actual call out, but I gave a different perspective that, again, shifted the narrative a little bit, taking her by surprise. And I had also shared with the attendees of the session that there were over 80 different responses to this particular call out. Again, Fast Company, it's a large media platform. But out of 85, if not more responses, I was one of 3 other subject matter experts that was highlighted in that article, which again speaks to giving the journalist exactly what she was looking for, and also demonstrating that I had researched and engaged with one, her call out first and foremost, but then also familiarized myself with her work and the type of narrative and tonality that she uses in her PR, or not PR, but in her media topics. So if I was going to bring that back full circle into podcast hosting or reaching out to podcast hosts, excuse me, is take some time to ideate exactly what your topics would be that you want to present to those podcast hosts to show why you are the perfect podcast guest for them. The more that you do your research and engage with their work and show that you are an active participant and active audience member of their work, the more likely they are to want to bring you on their platforms because it shows that you are a devoted follower of theirs. And I feel that, again, that speaks to the relationship and wanting to lead with connection and not just leading with your expectation of wanting to get booked on their show or to get highlighted in whatever form of media that it is that they're creating, which can have long lasting impact to you becoming not only just a podcast guest on one conversation, but you can become a media partner of theirs to keep the conversation going long term, because it's not just about a quick win. It's about being somebody that they can turn to when they're looking for something very specific for their next series or their next pieces of content that they're working on that they need a subject matter expertise for. So, different type of story or example, but again, I think the dynamic and the depth of that example speaks to podcast guesting and just subject matter expertise and how to get recognized in platforms following core principles and core practices. My last point here from recapping what I shared at Outlier is the impact of delayed gratification. I already kind of highlighted some of the points from this, which is basically leading with connection without having expectations of landing an interview or landing an opportunity. But I just want to emphasize that when building incredible relationships with media, the most important thing to remember is that it takes time to build a genuine connection. And when you lead with building a genuine connection, it's often more impactful than immediately seizing an opportunity. I always believe that we need to prioritize relationship building over quick gains. And as I shared in my story talking about the opportunities that I've had over the last year, who's to say that each of those guests that has invited me on their platforms won't come back to me this year or next year or the following year, continuously building the relationship first and foremost, but bringing me back on their platforms to talk about new insights and new advice and new guidance that speaks ultimately to how I want to impact and serve their audience. I believe that by focusing on relationships, it opens the space and opens the door to endless amount of opportunities as long as you continue to evolve and expand with your relationships, just as much as you continue to evolve and expand in your marketing and your business and your PR or any other facet that is directly connected to you and your subject matter expertise or just other roles that you play in your life. That wraps it up for the points that I talked about during my session at Outlier. But I feel that I can take the principles and the practices here even deeper into other forms of media that has given me a lot of inspiration for other episodes to come. I always feel like I want to keep everybody on their toes with my episodes when I sit down to record or when I'm ideating kind of what I want to talk about. And there was a comment from one of the other speakers that has really stood out to me, where he mentioned that listening to my podcast, he really picked up on how self-aware the content is, but then also how self-aware I am when it comes to guiding and ideating really the topics and the depth of what I want to talk about in the show. And that is one of the biggest affirmations that I can receive with using this platform is there really is a lot of self-awareness in the work that I do, but also just in the person that I am. So bringing that back full circle into wanting to keep you on your toes, almost kind of keeping you by surprise to provide you content that you might be looking for before you even ask for the content. Do you see the intersections there? I think that's pretty awesome. Again, self aware to the type of guide and the type of host and the type of curator that I want to be for this podcasting experience for you all. So, I have a lot of inspiration for the upcoming episodes, but I'm just going to surprise you when those are ready. But do keep your eyes peeled for diving into more of the earned media world, because I think that that is really valuable, for those who are wanting to learn more about PR and media relations and using the media space to get your voice, your message, your business, your brand, whatever it is, recognized. But there also are core characteristics and interpersonal skills that you can almost adapt as a person to become your own facilitator to get those opportunities as well. So I do want to blend, both sides of the pendulum of just what this space is and what it represents. So I'm really excited to see where we go and take this platform in 2024. And one of the other things that I'm really excited about is we have completely moved production in-house. So you will be able to see content more consistently. And that's something that I'm actually really excited about because again, I think it keeps you intrigued, it keeps you connected, and we're just going to go, lengths with this platform. So I am excited. But nonetheless, that wraps it up for this episode, and I will see you all next week. I am planning on doing an episode every week. So big shifts, big changes for 2024.